specifically on the report, but I just want to talk about Operation Make Safe that's also being rolled out in some parts of Essex, Southend and Thurrock, and this is an operation whereby the target is hotels, motels, guest houses, and looking at the workers around that area, in that area, to think about being aware and, I suppose, spotting signs of exploitation within the area. So the operation is training and making sure that those officers or those workers in those areas are picking up where vulnerabilities lie and whether there's exploitation going on in their industry. In terms of performance and monitoring, we've got an audit schedule to improve practice and identify themes that are going on. This will help to improve service delivery and develop where and if needed as well. The audit schedule that we've got is set for the year. However, should there be the need to include anything new that's emerging, we're flexible to be able to do that so that specific areas of focus can be well. In terms of policies and procedures, that brings together all the priorities across the board. So this is Safeguarding Adults Board, Children's Board, Health and Wellbeing Board and the Community Safety Partnership. And this is because what we want to do is to make sure that we're all working together. There's no duplication. We, I suppose we complement the work of each other, and we're making sure that resources are used efficiently and to the best of our ability. In terms of participation and engagement, we're working very closely with the Youth Cabinet, Young Voices, and our Signs of Safety conference that is going to be run tomorrow, entitled Building Better Connections, focuses on exploitation, but also we've got involvement from young people and children's voices, and we've consulted them on the direct work that's being done with them by our practitioners, and we've asking them the question, what's working well, what needs to improve, and how best practitioners can engage with them. It's important for us to understand what works for them and how they see the work that we do with them. And so that's the focus of part of the workshops tomorrow. In terms of learning improvement, we have, as a result of the consultation with practitioners and other stakeholders, we are refreshing the website, and we've done some of the work, and we will be adding on learning videos, podcasts, in particular one that we've developed with our SET partners around the Think Family approach and the importance of that. And there is a podcast that's being launched this week across all the SET partners websites. In terms of progress across some of our action plans, it's noted what I've done in the report is put a grading on there in terms of where we are in terms of numbers, so all the action plans, all the action, the numbers of actions and where we are, and so we're progressing well with all our action plans, and there's a few there that are outstanding, but we're not worried about any of those that are outstanding, and we've progressed since the last time I presented some of our action plans to you. And so that's the progress and the update from the NCP.
Thank you. Do any members have any comments or questions on the report? Councillor Watson.
I felt that some of this report was missing because I quite like that action plan and see it radiated. So even though you're being question this, I'm quite visual, so I like to, and then you can drill into what is still red or what is amber and red, and have a more succinct conversation with the councillors on what's happening on those sort of areas. Though you gave a good report, well, I just felt that that was missing and needed, and it probably wouldn't have took you very long to do that. Okay. So going forward, can we have that at the next meetings? Okay. Is that okay?
Across all the action plans.
Yeah, you've got the action plan that you bought last time. That was really useful, so we can see what was against and how you rated it on all of the actions that was needed in comparison to what was actually being done.
Okay. I did a synopsis of it because I felt that we had so many action plans that I wasn't sure whether you would want that all of it. You just wanted the highlighted, but I can do that. I can put the full action.
I'm more of a detailed person. Yeah. Okay. Maybe some of my colleagues aren't, but I am more with the data and the stats and just more the visual stuff. And I just think it gives the opportunity for any councillor sitting around here who can actually, though you gave an update, a good update, it gives us an opportunity to have a look and maybe pull up something that you haven't really covered because you didn't feel at the time that it was important to what was being spoke about now, but it might be important to one of us. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
So I just
Sheila.
wanted to add to that. I think the last time Priscilla only brought the action plan on the peer review.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think, is that your question, whether it's just the peer review or all of the other, because there's quite a lot of actions, I think that's what it's saying, across all of them. But
the peer review is the most important one for us right now.
Okay.
So I think for the peer review, it needs to be one like that. That would be really good.
Okay, that's no problem.
Just leading off that, actually, thank you for clarifying that. Just leading off that, I didn't realise that there were so many action plans currently going, and we've got quite a new committee, so it might be a good idea to actually have a session where you do bring all the action plans. So when I looked at the LSCP action plans progress, I did recognise the Sam and Kyle's series case review because we had that in a closed meeting last year, but I don't think I was aware of the series case review. Frankie, I've obviously been aware of the peer review and the LPR Leo.
Yeah, so that's the learning practice review that was published in January this year.
Right, okay, so that's from January this year. And I just had a question about Shay and Ashley because it said it's not signed off, and I just wonder if you can explain what that means.
Yeah, so what happens is once the report is published, we then pull together a multi-agency task and finish group, if you like, to look at the actions and the recommendations and to then identify actions to meet the recommendations. So all the people that we've gathered around the table will then be able to talk about what types of actions they can, from their agency's perspective, put into place to meet those recommendations, and that takes a bit of time. So there's a bit of to and fro, and we put the bare bones of an action plan together, and then we share it, and then we put realistic time scales in there. We have that conversation about who's going to do what, and then it's signed off, and then we do start to do the work before it's signed off. If agencies have said, yeah, that's mine, I'm going to do it, but then we sign it off, and then agencies get on with the work. And so we're at the point where that action plan hasn't been signed off. It's due to be signed off very shortly.
Okay, great, that's fine. Can I just ask about timescale? So the series case review, Frankie, where does that stem from?
So series case review, Frankie, was published, if I remember rightly, middle of last year, and some of the actions, the action plan that I had when I first started had started to progress, but we started to progress it more, I suppose, towards the end of last year and this year, and so there's quite a few actions in there. We've progressed them a lot more. So that's where we are.
Is that going to be coming to the extraordinary meeting that we've got next month?
It's not a high risk notification. It's
right.
Something
okay.
different.
Something different. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this was an incident probably over 2 years ago. I think so. Probably over 2 years ago. It's been published.
Yes.
So these are all published reports. So they're widely available to the public, and may well have been to an ONS probably a year or maybe 18 months or more ago.
Okay. Yeah.
But what's really helpful, the way Priscilla's put all this, is you can see it in one place.
Yeah.
And I think probably that's why it's looking a bit like, oh, there's quite a lot there.
Yeah.
Some of those actions overlap. So from some reviews, they're similar-ish. But I think it would be helpful for a committee to then have a look at what those actions are. So you've got a sense of where they're positioned, and sort of a lot of them are complete.
Yes.
And it's really about having assurance that learning from those reviews has been taken and has been put into place.
Okay, because from this bar chart here, it's saying only 2 actions out of all of them have been completed, according to this chart. That was what I was slightly.
Peer review.
2 from the peer review, but all the others are either on track. Action complete. There's only 2 from the peer review and nothing from any of the others.
Is that the rag? No, the rag rating.
That's the rag rating. So
The regulator.
So peer review, blue are completed and embedded.
Yeah.
The green 19 are complete and 5 are amber. So we're still progressing those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy about that one because I've seen the report and that came to the last meeting and I can see it there. It might have been nice to have had an update on some of the amber things there, but I mean, I know about that one. The other ones, there's no actions completed and embedded.
So Frank, so kind of erring on the side of caution. So with the embedded ones, I didn't want to rag rate them blue until I was actually sure, and until the partnership could assure themselves that agencies had actually taken them and embedded them. So they are almost embedded, but they're not. So
Okay.
I didn't want to kind of say that they are if they're not.
Yeah.
But they're progressing and they probably will be in time to come.
Yeah, because on first sight it was slightly alarming
Oh.
that there were lots of outstanding actions, even though they seem to be on track, and from things that, apart from one of them that I did, that I have had sight of.
I think.
So yeah,
where we say it's embedded, it's where it's those actions have been going on for a long time, and agencies are using those recommendations and the actions throughout everything that they do, and it's been taken up throughout the organisation, and then when we can be assured that that's been done, then we regulate them.
Okay, good. So not quite as alarming as it seems on first sight, but yeah, I think it would be good from my perspective to actually see the full range of those recommendations, and yeah, it's good to have in the form of an action plan, a rag-rated action plan. Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the report?
I'm just wondering, sorry, Shia, about the action experiencing problem. Which one is that? In the chart, in the progress chart.
No, I think it was just if there was a red colour.
The red
but
colour.
there isn't any, is there?
Yeah, no, we don't
It's
have
just
any.
a
We don't
guide.
have any actions that we're concerned about.
Okay.
Yeah, so the amber ones are the ones that have started. We've progressed them, but they're not finished. They're not complete yet.
Oh,
I think that's just the code. So if there was a red one, that's what that would mean.
okay.
Any other questions? I've got one more comment really. So obviously under participation and engagement, again, it sounds like a good engagement activity with the young people, children, young people at the Young Voices Grange Water Activity Day. So I just wanted to note that again, Grange Waters is an important component on how we run and improve our services. And on that note, to raise that, I've been approached to ask the committee if they would like to go and visit Grange Waters to see the activities that happen there. I'm certainly going to take up this offer, and if other members of the committee would like to go and see what's happening at Grange Waters. I mean, last meeting we heard about what an essential component it was for our SEND children, especially our post-16 SEND children who go there twice a week, and how that has contributed to our SEND improvement journey. And obviously the partnership is working with it as well. Really great place to actually go and engage with young people in the event that was running there. So if the committee, is that something the committee would like to do? Yeah.
I wouldn't be interested in it necessarily. Been there so many times, I think you go and see it again.
Okay.
But no, not more interested.
Okay. Can you arrange that for us? Michelle?
Yeah, there's a site visit that the committee wants to go as to Grange Waters, then you can arrange that. Officers in attendance and committee members.
Great, thank you.
Why don't you check, Chair, just to ask, what would be the purpose of the site visit though? There needs to be a purpose for the visit.
The purpose would be to see what provision we actually do offer there, because it's just very, I mean, we've heard in several different reports there that it's a component of services that are running. So we've had it as a component in this report. So we've got actions from the peer review action plan about engagement, and the LSCP partnership has done that at Grange Water's event. We heard last meeting about how important it was to send provision, which we had a report that we had needed to extend and improve our send provision.
With respect, Chair, I mean, there's many buildings where there's provision provided. I'm not going to go and see all of them, are we? Why particularly Grange Water? It just come across as a little bit political rather than something we really need to do as a committee.
Well, I'm afraid I have to respectfully disagree with you. I mean, we've had several reports now to committee that have highlighted Grange Waters as an essential part of the provision that we offer. So I would like to go and see what services are offered there. If you don't wish to come, that's fine. Other members of committee have said that they wish to go and see it. I'm not sure what your objection is, really.
I think what I would probably add is LSCP went to Grange Waters, but if Grange Waters were not there, they would go somewhere else to do that provision. So yes, they went to Grange Waters, but I don't think that was the most important reason why you went to.
No, it was an activity that was being run at the time, and that was the time where we thought, well, rather than develop something new, why not engage with the children there while they were doing an existing activity?
I suppose what I'm saying is it isn't essential to the LSCP that it's at Grange Waters.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean.
Yeah. But it was essential to the SEND provision improvement for over 16 provision.
I just feel that it's a political manoeuvre, and it has no bearing on the activities of this committee, certainly not on this paper. And it was mentioned in the last paper, but it didn't have any bearing on the item that came to committee as such. It's just the location that an activity took place in. I would like to have a vote on whether we should do this or not, please.
Okay.
To be honest, I'd be interested in going to see what provision is sitting down there. I mean, like, if I live in the Bellis ward, I think I've been down there once when the yacht club was there, but it'd be really good to go down there and see what the young people of our borough do, especially if we have got SEN provision sitting down there, and what that means and what do they provide.
We can still take
So
a vote
for
on
me,
it.
yeah, so for me, it's about like what the children, there's an offer there for the children, what it is,
But
and all of that.
I understand that, Lee, but what bearing does that have on anything in this report? Nothing at all. There's no reason, out of all this report, there's no reason for this to take place other than a politically motivated stunt. If you accept what I'm saying.
Well, I think we'll have to agree to differ on that. Should we move to a vote?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Those for? Those against? It's 4-4. Chair has the deciding vote, so I vote for. So that's carried.
Chair, the voting is only between members, elected members, because for the co-opted members, it's only where it's in the education, where there's an education there. So, for example, schools or schools. So we'd have to do the vote again.
Sorry, I don't. You're saying that only elected members can vote?
Yeah, when it comes to voting, co-opted members don't actually have a vote unless it's to do with an education facility like school.
Right. Okay.
Did you want to do the vote again and I can record it?
Okay. So what's those? Can you explain what the difference is? So if we were visiting a school,
so
then all members could vote, but if we're not visiting a school, I mean, I think regardless of which way vote goes, if members or other parties are interested in going to Grange Waters and seeing the provision that happens there, there is an invitation to do so, and it's one that I will be taking up.
Yeah, and I mean, committee members or any member for that matter can actually visit Grange Waters without having an official site visit there. So regardless of whether committee chooses not to go, anyone here can still go and see Grange Waters for themselves, and I'm sure maybe officers may be able to help in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we do have members visit Grange Waters.
And is it okay for other members of the committee to visit?
Yeah, to be fair, we use Grange Waters through Woodside, so I would be able to go as a governor anyway.
Oh,
So that'd be okay.
Yeah. Okay. So all of those committee members, not necessarily official members, who would be interested in going to visit Grange Waters. Okay. Well, perhaps if that can be arranged. Sure. And Grace. Yeah. Okay, great.
You're looking pleased,
Oh no, I was just about to write, that's all.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments on the report? So we have recommendation 1.1 on page 17 to agree.
Agree.
Item 7, the 2020 to 21 annual complaints and representations report, children's social care, on pages 23 to 38. Can I ask Lee Henley to introduce the report, please? Can you hear us?
Thank you, Chair. I'll provide a high-level summary of the report and then happy to take any questions. The detail of this report is really contained within the appendix on page 27 onwards. So I'll run through some of those key headlines. On page 27, this captures activity levels compared to the previous year, and this shows that there have been fewer complaints received compared to 2019-20. So there were 8 complaints that we logged for 2021 compared to 17 the previous year. On page 28, this shows that 44% of complaints were upheld. The lower the better this figure. So that is a slight improvement compared to the previous year, where 50% of complaints were upheld. Page 28 also shows that there were no complaint escalations from stage 1 to stage 2, so that's really positive. And page 28 also shows that 75% of those complaints that responded to were responded to within time frame. Again, that is an improvement compared to the previous year, where 47% of complaints were upheld. Pages 31 of the report indicates where those upheld complaints, those 4 upheld complaints, relate to. And on pages 32, 33, that just shows, page 32 to 33 indicates where the complaints, the upheld complaints relate to. Page 31 indicates the areas the complaints relate to. On page 34, this shows a summary of local government ombudsman findings where they made a decision in the reporting period. Happy to take any questions.
Do any members have any questions? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you for the report, Lee. On page 28, you mentioned the table, and I'm looking at the percentage timeliness of bonds. It's gone up from 47% to 75%, which is really good to see. This was something that I raised last year when this report came to committee, because at the time it had gone down by about 40 percentage points. I think it was in the late 80s and it went down to 47%. I went back and looked at the minutes of that meeting earlier this week, and you said that this timeliness of response was an area of particular focus going forward for improvement. Obviously, I can see we have improved quite a lot, up to 75%, but I was wondering if you could give us an overview of what improvement has taken place since this report last came to committee, when you said is going to be a particular area of focus?
I think what we've got to bear in mind is, the volume of complaints is low. So the 75% is based on 8 complaints that were responded to. So 6 of those 8 were responded to within time frame. So it has improved. Children's services complaints can be complex. So some will go over, the 10 working days. But I think the report shows there has been an improvement compared to the same time last year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Watson.
Thanks for your report, Lee. On page 32, upheld complaints, what's that in comparison to how many complaints you actually received? So what was the overall amount, how many you received and how many was upheld? Because you've got 100%, so how many complaints?
No, that's fine. So if you look at page, so on page 30, so that's just showing the complaints that came in for the year. So, for example, on page 32, the complaint that in the 2021 column for CFAT 3, 1 complaint came in and that complaint was not upheld. Again, so if you go down to page 33. For the disabled children, you'll see that 4 complaints were received for disabled children, and the column to the right, 3 of those were upheld. So that's 75% for that particular service. But across for the whole year, for the whole reporting period, 9 complaints were closed for the whole service, and 4 of those were upheld. So an overall 44%. Upheld percentage. Lower the better for that figure.
So have you got like a national benchmark against that though?
There's not a national benchmark generally. I think what just probably worth noting is that it's really positive that our complaint volumes are low. The local government ombudsman published their annual report a few months back. So that covered, complaints across the whole of the public sector. And what I think stood out from that was the services that received the most complaints were children's services, but that was not reflective of Thurrock. So that's a positive. And I think the percentage upheld figure across the country was around about 67%. So ours is lower than that. So that's positive as well, if that helps.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. So going back to Councillor Anderson's question, what improvements did you make in order for these to go down in your service? Because obviously whatever improvements you've made has had a positive effect because our complaints have gone down. What did you make in order to achieve that? And also, what have you got planned to get our complaints down even lower for next year?
Well, we do our best to learn from complaints. So there's learning we need to do from this report. So if you look at some of the ombudsman findings, so we're making sure as a council that we need to learn from those areas. So there was a focus around maybe some delays. So it's about making sure we take that forward for this year, and we log and track learning on our complaint system. And Janet can come in. So it's important, I think, that we look at the complaint numbers are low anyway. They're really low anyway, and we're always going to have complaints. If I came to the committee and said we had no complaints, I think you might be slightly suspicious. So we're doing work to raise the awareness of complaints as well. So I know for every child case, Janet's service, they promote the complaints process so that people are aware of how they can complain. We're working on a leaflet at the moment to raise the awareness of complaints. So we're always going to have some complaints. But I think from my point of view, the fact that it's low is a real positive, and we are learning from those complaints.
Okay, without a doubt. Thanks, Lou.
You're welcome.
Good. Just before I bring Councillor Anderson in again, I had a couple of questions. So I noticed that there was sort of this year there were 4 complaints. The majority of the complaints actually came regarding disabled children. I wondered if there were any particular reasons for that, and what's been done to address that, and also that there was a significant rise in members' inquiries, what kind of things impacted this? They're up from 22 to 30. So was this because of COVID? So it was easier for people to contact through their local councillor, or was there some other reason for those changes in the figures?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of your first question, in terms of the disabled children, they have 4 complaints, 3 of those were upheld. Again, so that will be the focus of our learning to take forward, really. So, and I think the theme from that, so three of those 4 complaints for disabled children, are complaints 1, 2, and 3 that are shown on page 29. And I think the theme there was, delays in communicating with parents, and maybe some delays in making actually, we said we'd make a phone call back to a parent on a said day, but we were waiting on information from a third party, so we didn't call the parents. So it's making sure we, do what we kind of say we do. So it's more of a delay theme that we need to look at within that particular service area. And to be honest, in terms of the members' inquiries, I mean, they are going up across all service areas, and it's not a massive rise in terms of this area. I'm sorry, I haven't got at hand to what those inquiries related to. There wasn't too many COVID stuff from memory, but members' inquiries have gone up across the council generally. So, and we need to maybe think about how we kind of deal with that.
Okay. The other theme that I noticed is that the learning from 2019-20 and this year's learning, it's still all centred around communication. What do you think the reason for that is, and what action can we take to improve our communication moving forward?
I think for me, for this year, I mean, for this year, Chair, I think it's under the you're quite right. It's under the communication column. But when I did a deeper dive of the complaints, it was really, it was delays and us updating parents on cases, etc. So I think we're aware of that now. We need to learn from that going forward. But again, I still think, going back to my point, the complaint numbers are really low here for the service, and I think that's a real positive.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a two-edged sword, whether it's positive or negative, having low complaints. Is it low complaints because it's not accessible for people to complain, or is it low complaints because the service is really good? And it's an interesting question. I think complaints should be encouraged if possible, so that we can learn from that and improve the service as we go forward. But yeah, well done. Sorry,
Jane's got her hand up.
Right, okay. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Addison and then I'll come to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, going back to the first point I made, as well as Councillor Watson. When you gave your answer, you talked about the fact that we had improved in terms of timeliness, that we're always learning, etc. That's something I'd expect us to always be doing. I think what I and Councillor Watson were asking was, have we made any changes to our processes since last year, for example, that could be part of the reason that had improvements in places like timeliness? If we haven't, then that's fine. But I'm just wondering, have we actually made any improvements, changes to any of our processes at all?
Sorry, I could just about hear some of that. It's not a very good line. Janet may want to come in, but I mean, yeah, processes will. I mean, complaints learning flows off the back of what the the learning was from the previous year. So, Janet, have we got a sense of if we made any process changes over and above?
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I have my hand up, but I don't think you can see that.
Oh,
that's fine. Okay. I think I would echo what Lee is saying. Really, we work really close with Lee's team. We have tracking processes in place. We make sure that we're following up those complaints, any inquiries that are coming through. We track them. So we get emails advising us of a complaint. We give it so many days, and we kind of track it. So we don't wait until the day it's due. So we're trying to make sure that we're ahead of it and that we're actively following those complaints up. And in terms of making sure we're learning from any complaints, we will deliver training to staff, we'll have those conversations, and we'll try and make improvements. But we are working really closely with Lee's team. And as he said, at the moment, he's just developed a complaints leaflet, which he sent across to me this week. We're looking at that. So we want to get that out. So when we're going out to visit families, when we're carrying out assessments, when we're writing to them, we can make sure they absolutely know how to make a complaint and how to give compliments, because we get lots of compliments too, which don't necessarily show here, but we actually get a lot of compliments come through to us as well about the good work we're doing. So there are some positives too. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you, Janet. That helped. Does that answer your question? Nicola.
At one point I was going to raise it, and it's not necessarily directed at you, Lee, it's around the communication. It may be that the team aren't comfortable in giving out incomplete news or bad news. People don't always like to deliver a bad message. They want to deliver a good message, so that's why they react quicker. So is it maybe just a training issue to give your staff the confidence to be able to say, sorry, we can't do this, or sorry, we can't do this at the moment, it's going to be, the timeline's going to elongate. I know that I've had that in my previous roles with my team. They just don't like delivering a bad message.
Should I take that, Lee? I suppose I don't think it's so much that people don't want to give bad news. I think sometimes there's a crossover between a family contacting us contacting the family back. So I think in order to make sure that people are getting the message and they're feeling like we're communicating with them, is that we need to put more things in writing, because often it's about not being able to evidence that we've been in contact. But sometimes when complaints come in and somebody says something hasn't been communicated to them, the feedback sometimes from the service is that they've tried to contact the family, usually by phone. But I think what we need to do is get better at following things up in writing so that people are really clear about our responses.
Absolutely, an audit trail is always the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yes.
Councillor Akinberry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want clarification on this, because if we want to progress, we need to compare ourselves with others. What I'm thinking is that instead of us comparing ourselves with the national figure, why don't we compare ourselves with our neighbor? So in the future, is it possible we have, let's say, the percentage of complaints from, let's say, the other side of SS, what is it called? Dafford area, or Greenish, or area that is similar to us, if we can just have a view of how many complaints have they had in a year, how many complaints have we had in a year, then we can compare if we are getting more complaints than others, not compared to national figure. That's what I'm thinking.
Who wants to take that? We're talking about statistical neighbours, I think.
Yeah. I'm happy to start, and somebody else can join in. We've asked these questions before, and people are not always willing to share with us their complaints. And we could go and look on websites, because everyone has to produce annual reports. So we could go and look at some other local authorities. As you say, that we have got statistical neighbours for us for children's services, and we've got a couple in the region, which is Southend and Peterborough. So we could look for authorities that are similar to us, but I think that would involve maybe, I don't know, Lee, your team having to have a look on some of the websites to see reports like this, because everyone has to produce an annual report and publish it. But there isn't a national collection, so we don't ever have to, all of us, report nationally, and the DFE or somebody puts it together in charts for us. But the only way of doing that would be either to contact them direct, and I know sometimes when you contact direct, people are not always perhaps willing to share, but I think we all have to produce annual reports like this. So it might be an exercise of having a look on some, even if we selected 4 or 5 authorities and said, what do we look like compared to them.
Yeah.
But it'll be based on, and what they've published must be accurate, because I'm sure they're not going to publish things if it's not accurate.
That's true.
So I don't know, Lee, what you think about that. Have you had that put to you before? Sorry, I'm not creating extra work for your service.
We can do that, Sheila. We'll have a look at that next time. Not a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Last one, promise.
Yeah.
As well as complaints, have you had any FOIs?
So sorry, FOIs on.
Freedom of information and children's services.
Yeah, we get lots. We get lots of FOIs about children. Yeah, we get lots as a council. We get high volume of FOIs generally that cover a range of things, and yeah, they definitely include children's services.
Yeah.
Not in relation to complaints, but.
No. But on FOIs, how many do you have in children's services? It would be good to know. And have you made the turnaround deadline?
I haven't got a figure off top. In terms of the council's performance on FOIs, we are very high performing. So we process around about 96 to 97% of FOIs within the time frame. So we've got really good performance as a council. So it certainly wouldn't be a poor figure for children's.
That'd be good to see though, Lee.
It's not relevant for a complaints report though. It's a totally different subject matter. FOI. I produce a separate report. So FOI performance is part of our annual information governance report that includes information governance activity, which goes on to Standards Audit Committee. So this is just purely a complaints paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But I'm just interested in the FOI, because that's why I asked you, because you deal with the children's services complaints, and normally complaints and FOIs, they have got a different process, but they both go to an ombudsman, they're both within a timeline, and you'll bring both to see what it was in children's services, the proportion of the FOIs in comparison to across the whole council. That's the reason why I asked.
Yeah, I think Lee might be saying that it goes through a different governance
No, it
procedure.
does go through different governance,
Yeah.
I get that, but that's the reason why I was asking.
Right.
Because they do.
It doesn't go, so they don't go to a the complaints is regulated by the local government and social care ombudsman. FOIs are regulated by the Information Commission Office, so that the data protection registrar. So it's a total separate area.
Okay. We're going to have to move on. We've had quite a long time on this report, and I've got to chair time tonight because we've got a time limit on us being in this room. So I'm going to move on. First of all, can we agree the recommendation 1.1 on page 23, which is just a note, I believe. Agreed. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8, children's services savings, education and skills. Michelle Lucas, can you present the report, please?
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. I'll just go through the report. The report sets out how we are looking to make some efficiencies within our education skills side of children's services. What we've undertaken in education and skills is a full review, actually, colleagues, around what our statutory duties are. So what are the statutory duties around education and skills? And as part of that, we've been working on this review for probably around 12 months, actually. And what that's enabled us to do is to hold a number of vacancies as people have left the organisation. We haven't recruited to those vacancies, recognising that we needed to make some savings. What we have done is also undertake an asset review. So the report sets out the fact that we've looked at our operating model for the Adult Community College, and as a result of that work, we've now relocated our adult learning offer into South Essex College and into local community hubs. That has enabled us to release the Richmond Road building, which used to house our Adult Community College, so that's gone back to our colleagues in assets. We've also looked at what we're delivering down in Tilbury. We had a youth provision in Tilbury called Riverside. Again, we've been able to release that back to our colleagues in assets because we've moved that offer into another premises in Tilbury that's enabled us to continue the work particularly when we're thinking around our SEND young people, making sure we've got that offer available. And the last part about the assets review is we have brought together our youth offending service into Inspire Your Future in Grays, which brings all of our integrated youth offer into one place in Grays. One of our ambitions has been to do this because actually what we recognise is by enabling those young people to access the whole range of services in Inspire, that brings a better offer for that particular cohort of young people, and that's enabled us to actually release another building. So in total, Children's Services have released 3 assets back to our corporate colleagues. Moving on to the actual services. So the first thing we looked at was school effectiveness, school improvement as it was known historically. And we looked at what we have to provide statutorily. And of course, we protected those services, but we were able to reduce in that area 2 full-time posts and 1 part-time post. And that was around, and an example of that would have been around school governance. All of our schools now are academies bar 1, so we do not have to offer those services. So we've looked at what we can do statutorily, and those things that are not statutory, we've moved out, and that's meant that we've been able to give up 2.5 vacancies in that area. Moving down, we then looked at the other area for us was Inspire, and again thinking about our integrated youth offer, we've managed to hold vacancies there. We've moved to a much more targeted approach, so now our focus is on SEND learners and those that are involved in risky behaviours. So it'll be those young people that may be involved in the criminal justice system or experiencing sort of other vulnerabilities. That's enabled us to release another 10 full-time vacancies. So in total, the education and skills side of Children's Services have managed to release back 12.5 posts. Get that right, 12.5 posts. We've managed that via vacancies, and I think that's because we've had that time to work on this. We haven't had to put at this stage any of that side of our house at risk, because actually we've managed that via vacancies. We've changed our operating model. We've moved away from what would have perhaps been some universal opportunities to a much more targeted approach, which is where our statutory duties lie. The other thing in this report, of course, is our nurseries. So our nurseries in Tilbury, we've got 2 council-run nurseries in Tilbury. Again, they are not a statutory duty. It's not a statutory duty on the local authority to run council nurseries. The duty is around sufficiency. So we do have a duty, that's to make sure there's enough places, but not to actually run those nurseries. We've gone out to consultation, and what I'm proposing is consultation will close around the end of October time, and I'm proposing that I bring a briefing note back to committee that will enable you to look at what came back as part of that consultation. Clearly, one of the things we're looking at here is to see if there is opportunities for those nurseries to continue, but with someone else operating them. That's what we're looking to do. That's where we're looking to go with this. And clearly we'll bring back more as part of the briefing note to committee around where we are in that process. The other thing within this report, of course, is home to school transport. This is a statutory duty on the local authority. However, we've done a lot of work now on considering what was historically colleagues have been deemed as unsafe routes. We've done an awful lot of work now to go back and review. Some of these routes haven't been reviewed for many years. So we've gone back to review those routes to see what of those can become now deemed to be safe. And of course, that means the duty is not on the local authority to transport those young people. And of course, committee will remember, probably this time last year actually, the decision was made around post-16 SEND transport. I'm pleased to say that we've now got our video up online around travel training, really well received. But just to reassure committee, clearly this will be done on an individual basis. We won't disadvantage
any of our most vulnerable learners, but we are putting a number of things in place now that will enable those students, and I think committee were really clear about this, independence. We want our SEND young people post 16 to have independence. We want them to be able to travel independently, not to rely on the bus, because that's about their independent living. That's about enabling them to engage in those wider activities that all young people engage in, and we want our SEND young people to engage in those processes. So I think that probably brings my overview. I don't know, Sheila, if there's anything from you, but I think that brings my overview to a close on this. I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think open it up for questions.
Yeah.
Any questions? Councillor Snell.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I just want to be clear on what constitutes an unsafe or a safe route.
So it's quite a technical term, councillor, forgive me. So what you have to do is you have to do a risk assessment on routes, and what it really is there public transport that would get that child from A to B? What's the route to the public transport? And actually there's a whole range of things. It's quite a complex thing to do. So you have to do a risk assessment. Yeah. You have to look at what the walking would be. So is there public transport, for instance? Are there buses that young people could get to the school? Are there trains that young people get to the school? What would that look like? So that's what brings us into what would be deemed, either it's a safe or unsafe route. They're very historical, I have to say. I'm reviewing a couple at the moment. They've been in place for an awful long time. However, we do need to review these, and we've undertaken the review, and one of them now deeming to be a safe route. We have to actually get council advice on this, so it's legal advice about what we're doing. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
it's quite a technical.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
although I think really this should come as a separate report, because this hasn't come to committee. I don't want to get too bogged down into the detail of this when it's sort of like only got a mention here. That actually needs to come as a proper report to scrutiny so that we can scrutinise that properly. But if it's quick, yeah.
Just a quick question on, we're talking about making them safe, but as obviously there are going to be some children, 16-year-old children, that will not be able to access that for all sorts of reasons. But I take it for those, that cohort of children would still be transporting them as before.
We would never disadvantage any of our SEND. I'm talking some of our unsafe routes. Sorry, Chair, if I may, just one more thing on that, and then I'll think. Some of our unsafe routes are not to do with SEND pupils at all. They're for mainstream pupils. So, but certainly, we will do individual assessments of our post-16 young people with SEND.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you for your report, but I've got quite a few questions actually. One of it is on transport, because I don't know how you constitute or put criterion for a child that maybe has Asperger's but can't get onto a bus, can't get onto travel because they just can't. But yet, where does that fit with the criteria of they're allowed to get transport, we provide them the transport, because they're not deemed with a complex terms or complex need or a SEND to give them that sort of transport. But then you've got this issue going with a child. So I don't understand how you constitute what is safe and what's not. I'm slightly what your criteria is, because for me, child with complex needs that can't do these sort of things, even though we want that life for them, because they just anxiety or everything else around it, we're going to take that away.
Yeah. Can I try and clarify? There's two things going. The unsafe route is in the main to do with mainstream young people, nothing to do with SEND.
But a lot of people in mainstream have got complex needs that sit in mainstream because there's not the provision it's SEN for them.
So any SEND pupil will be assessed. We would not leave our SEND young people if we felt that they weren't able to, access the transport. What we're looking at here is we've got a new travel training programme in place. And I'm talking post-16 now, if that gives a bit of reassurance. I'm not talking under 16, we're talking post-16. We've got travel training in place now. What I would say is, what's really heartened me is the amount of parents who've contacted us and said, we really want this. We really want to give our young person the opportunity. There will always be cases, counsellor, where they can't manage that. And to give you reassurance, then we would obviously make sure they got to their post-16 provision, you know. But I have been genuinely pleased about the number of parents who've approached me and said, do you know what, this is great. You know, we really want them to gain independence. We really think it's a positive step forward. We've probably, the last time I looked, we had about 15 on the programme. So there's a real buzz around the programme, and I'm really excited that we've got that available for some of our young people. But we'll always make sure that those young people that can't do that, can't access that, there will be, you know, support around them.
Okay.
Chair,
Yeah, can we broaden out the discussion a little bit? Actually, I'm going to come in before I come back to you, if that's okay, Councillor Watson. So I was just very disappointed when I first saw this report because of the lack of detail, even more so since I've heard that this is something you've been working on for 12 months. As we're talking about moving over to a new operating model, why has that not been brought to scrutiny before, is one of my questions. Also, I get that you've just told us, it wasn't in the report, but you've just told us that 12.5 full-time equivalent places have gone already, but I'm not clear whether these were vacancies that you were carrying from last year or these are vacancies to come. So questions that I want answered are, well, first of all, I know from our briefing that you actually had a fuller report with organisational charts that would have actually allowed the scrutiny committee to see what we had before, what we're going to have after, and some kind of idea of what this new operational model is moving forward. It's very difficult as a member of scrutiny to scrutinise what impact these changes are, these cuts are going to have on education and skills. So number one, first of all, what happened? What happened to the original report?
So can I take that?
Yeah.
I think when we had a briefing, what I said to you is, and this is what we normally do for any overview and scrutiny, is we do a number of versions of reports, and it goes through a number of versions of quality control and check. The reports didn't have organisational charts of what it looked like before operational model and a new operational model. What we had was some of the listings of posts, and what we're worried about is naming individual posts, because that may name individual staff who are going through a process right now. We're quite happy to say to you, and we're saying to you in committee, how many posts are affected, but not naming those individual posts, because, as I say, right now there are staff going through HR processes, so we don't want to get in front of that. In terms of the operational models, we haven't drawn up separate charts that say this is what it looked like, you know, 6 months ago and this is what it looks like now. These are proposals. We are still out consulting and waiting to get views back. So some of this might change as a result of all the consulting that we're doing. And at that point, once they are firm proposals, and I think that following consultation, we'll be going to Cabinet in December for Council to have a decision about this, then if that's required to help make those decisions, we can draw up, you know, charts of saying this is what it looks like now, this is what it will look like following the proposals. So there's nothing untoward about this. These are the reports that are coming through here. It's got all the information. We're quite happy to talk to them as officers to help that consultation process that we're going through right now.
Okay, so you're saying that when you have a clearer idea that it will come back to scrutiny?
I think that will be
before it goes to Cabinet? Because at the moment, the difficulty that I had reading this report and actually the report that follows is that there was not enough detail for me to be able to effectively scrutinise what impact these cuts. I don't even know what the extent of the cuts are. I mean, it sounds like school effectiveness is going completely, but I don't know. Obviously, there are some assets that are being released back, and some of that is already underway even before it comes to scrutiny. Certainly, the Thurrock Adult Community College is already gone, because I know that that was being cleared out over the summer. In terms of a review that's been going on for 12 months, wouldn't it have been a good idea to actually bring this to scrutiny at an earlier date? We've been asking for sort of line-by-line accounting budget reports to come to scrutiny so that we can help with this process and actually have a look at where some of these cost savings could be made and get some kind of cross-party agreement to that. But what I see here is a report that is lacking in detail, certainly lacking the detail for me to assess whether this is going to have a significant impact on what we're offering from a statutory point of view. I understand that you're saying to me that statutory services won't be affected, but I can't tell from this report whether that's the case or not. And I'm really just quite disappointed with the lack of report. That it's a report to note. This is a serious, this is a serious amount of cuts. The council is in a serious position. I'm also concerned, like with section 7, that it seems to be saying these are only the first round of cuts we can expect. The committee is reminded there remains a significant funding gap to address in both years if all of these proposed mitigations set out in the report are delivered. So that sounds to me, perhaps I'm wrong, as if this is just the first round of cuts coming through. And as it stands, I wouldn't be happy to recommend this report to Cabinet and recommend these proposals to Cabinet.
I think what I would say is I think most members are aware of the budget position that the council finds itself in at this moment in time. Every directorate is having to put forward efficiencies and different ways of working, transformation, in order to try and close that budget gap. This is not just children's services. So this is what children's services are saying in terms of changing services. In terms of our education services, the difference is we're mainly academies, academisation. So things like school effectiveness, the academies have the funding to run school effectiveness, and there is a teaching school in the authority that's taken over quite a lot of the duties that used to sit within the council. That now sits elsewhere because the funding has gone elsewhere. So that's what we've been looking at in terms of education and skills, is given we are now operating in a very different scenario with our schools being primarily academies, how can we then run services for the statutory duties that the council have still got to provide, because we still have some statutory duties within education. So the efficiencies we've put forward here will not close the whole gap that the council has. And I think I've seen reports where it's been clear, about the quantity of savings that's required, that will include staff savings and or other savings that we can put in place there. So what we're talking about here today will not close that whole gap, but that's for the whole council, not just for children's services. So what we've put forward here is about children's services.
Okay, so can I ask, the other issue that I had was regarding vacancies that have been kept open, and that happened during the last financial year. So it would have contributed to the savings made to close the budget gap in the last financial year. Because I mean, it's not, this report feels like, finally we get a budget report, but really we've known about the financial situation for over a year now. So I'm quite disappointed that this is coming so late in the process, and really is a bit of is, you know, I mean, what's the point of scrutiny? These are the things that we should have been involved in early in the process. I'm not saying, I'm sorry, it's not personal to you. I'm just saying, you know, this should have come to scrutiny a lot earlier. We were asking for it. And now we get a report where there's a lack of detail. I've had to ask sort of in our briefing to really make sure that you come with the number of posts that are going to go. I still don't know whether those posts contributed to savings last year or are contributing to savings this year.
But they won't have contributed to savings last year. They may have offset against some other budget overspends, because as I think most people are aware, there's always pressure on children's services budgets, particularly around placements. And we will find ourselves in that same position this year. Yeah. And when you have gaps in people being appointed or you know, there is funds that are for staffing that might then offset other budgets, so they don't become savings because you still can spend them in the new financial year. What's being put forward here is efficiencies that will not roll on year. They will go towards the budget deficits that we have. So that is, you know, what we put through here. Part of holding vacancies as well in this year is that we are aware of the magnitude of the efficiencies we're going to have to make, and that some of our permanent staff will be put at risk through this process. So there are some vacancies that can be used for redeployment purposes. So instead of recruiting permanent new people to those posts, they are posts that can be used. The ones that are not going to be deleted can be used to enable staff that are at risk to not be made redundant. And certainly some of these posts that were talked about in the education side, we have got some posts that we would be looking at for people who are at risk and who might be subject to redeployment. So there's a sort of two reasons why we're holding some of those vacancies.
Yeah. So how many vacancies were held last year?
Across the whole of the service?
Well, we're talking about education and skills at the moment, so I don't know if you've got those figures.
Off the top of my head. We'd have to get you that, because there'll be vacancies throughout the whole of last year, financial year.
Yeah. And how many
of the 12,
how many staff have been put on notice, and how many notices have been served? These are the kind of things that I was expecting to come in. The detail that I expected to come with this report. We're at a very late date now. This is October. These go to Cabinet, as you say, in December. I mean, I'm just frankly quite astonished that this report is coming with such little detail so late in the process, you know, and not allowing us on this committee to actually the required detail to actually assess what impact these cuts are going to have on services, and what the future plans might be for further efficiency savings, or let's call them what they are, cuts that are coming after that. So I'm disappointed at the lack of detail. I would like to know what's going and what's staying. Is there anything left of your service that is not income generating, that is funded from the general fund? I've really got no idea looking at this report. It's almost impossible for me to come to a decision about the impact of these cuts.
So in education and skills, there is no member of staff at risk as a result of these proposals.
Okay, so where do the 12.5?
They're from vacancies.
Right, so there's 12.5, we're carrying 12.5 vacancies.
Yeah.
And they will be deleted? They
will.
Okay.
As part of this proposal, yes.
So no staff have needed notices, okay. Okay. Good.
Can I just ask a question? You said that sorry. You said that you were going through a HR process right now with staff.
Mhm.
Is that for what reason? If there's no,
That's in the next report.
that's in the next. I'm sorry, that's the next report.
That's okay.
Okay, so can I ask one other question? So we're talking about in part of your report of closing 2 nurseries in Tilbury. So
Could I just, what we're proposing is that the council no longer runs those 2 nurseries.
So they no longer run those 2 nurseries, but is the staff sitting in those 2 nurseries the council's employees?
They are.
They are. And so how much will you be saving if you close those 2 nurseries, stop running them?
I think it's in the region of 110k.
A year?
Yeah.
And how many staff are sitting in there?
33.
Yeah, about 33 staff.
But how many staff?
33 is a lot. They're all part-time.
Right, so they've got 33 staff running 2 nurseries. And how many children?
I can check for you on the children.
Because you're telling us that you don't run the building, but you do the placements. So you've got to find placements now for these children if you close these 2 nurseries.
Yeah, so if we no longer run these nurseries, what our hope is that there are other organisations out there through the consultation will want to run those nurseries as going nurseries. So that's our first option. So that's what we're doing right now with the consultation, is we're having discussions about, is there any other provider out there who would want to run both of these nurseries, so the nurseries would continue to run. Now, if there is no one out there, we haven't gone through that process yet, but if there was no one out there, yes, that's the bottom line, is that the nurseries then would close. We would look at them closing in the summer term next year, so that for September 2022, we'd be looking at children going somewhere else. As I say, we haven't gone through a process yet to see if there are other providers out there, and we think there will be interest in these 2 nurseries.
So basically, every part of education that is in this borough is nothing to do with the council now.
Providing of
So
it.
we've got no nurseries after you close these 2. We've got no schools, primary or secondary.
There's
all.
one secondary
There's one
school.
secondary school.
So we've just got 1 secondary school that is under the leadership of the provision of the council.
Yeah.
I'm really not happy about these 2 nurseries being closed, to be frank with you. You know, they're in Tilbury, which is not going to provision it anyway. So I'm really against how this report is set up. There is no figures in this at all for me and for us. There's no way of working out how many staff. You're saying that you're going to keep all the staff, but you're making efficiencies of 1 million over 2 years. That's 500,000. So how is that going to be split down per year? How are you going to split that down through the provision? You're talking about a target operating model that I don't even know what that is or how that means. Or in the Riverside Youth Hub, you're talking about reduction in our universal youth work offer to enable a more targeted approach on what?
So what we'll focus on is SEND learners, those are our most vulnerable learners in the local authority. So when we're looking at our operating model, it will go to a very targeted approach, working with our most vulnerable children and young people.
But we've had that conversation about what you might constitute as most vulnerable may not necessarily be what residents feel their own children are. So we might need to widen that criteria, which means that you're not going to get the saving. But I just feel that by doing this, reducing the education and the skills of our future, which is our children, just on the back because we need to get savings for, and I get that children's services have to come to the table with part of their proposal. But my question is, at the end of the day, with views, what is actually going to be left of your services?
I mean, we will have services left in our education and skills. I mean, if the fact that most of the schools are academies, that's happened over a number of years in Thurrock. That isn't as a result of what's happening now in terms of the budgets, and that's something that schools choose to be. And once they choose to be academies, the funding goes into the schools, and I think that's a well-rehearsed conversation. There are still statutory responsibilities on the council. SEND is an area that is an absolute statutory responsibility on the council in terms of education. Educational psychology is another area that we, have a statutory duty to provide, and we still provide that. A number of support services around education, welfare, in terms of ensuring that if there are notices or fines to be given for non-school attendance, that is a duty on the council. So we have still got the services that we need to provide in a statutory responsibility for the council. We are still providing. There are still services that sit under Michelle's remit that are funded through the council to provide those, so including services to youth and skills as well. So I think what this is saying though is that we are moving to having a more targeted, and what that means is it's not a universal provision, and that includes for most areas of the business that we're looking at the moment. So that's what's on the table here, and that's, the nurseries, we are hopeful that we can find another provider who will take over the running of those nurseries. But we've been clear in the report, if we can't do that, then it will mean that the nurseries would close. If we can't do that, we're some way off that position at the minute, because we still need to test that market. And we have had some interest already, so we're hopeful, but I can't sit here today and say that we definitely have people lined up to take on the nurseries. It's quite unusual for a council to run a nursery, because it's councils have stopped actually providing their own nurseries, most councils some time ago, so it is quite unusual for a council to be running the nursery. It is our responsibility to make sure there's sufficiency of placement. Absolutely, that's our statutory responsibility, and we have people who do that, who are providing that service in the council.
I still say I'm really reserved about the nurseries. I'm not happy about them.
And this is consultation.
This is it. I'm not happy about them, and it's like I'd like to see the operating model on your service as well, how that's going to go into the Inspire Your Future.
For the youth offending service, so that is literally co-location. That's just
co-location.
We're not reducing any posts from our youth offending service, and it's also to give a more joined up service with our youth service as well, because we have a lot of our youth services working from Inspire. So if we have our YOS service there as well, sometimes they're the same children that they're seeing, same young people, but there's not a reduction in staffing as a consequence of the YOS moving in with Inspire.
Okay. Because other members, can I move on, Councillor Walker? Because other members have indicated, and we're actually already over time, I'm going to give other members the opportunity to ask questions. Just can I clarify, Sheila, if the nursery, if different provision can't be found for the nurseries, does that mean those 33 jobs will go?
Yeah.
So there will be 12.5 full-time jobs that are going to be taken, which will be deleted vacancies that we're already carrying. So there's no actual redundancies involved there, with the potential, we hope not, but the potential, we certainly hope not, with the potential for another 33, or whatever the full-time equivalent posts go from the nurseries. Okay, So I'm coming to Councillor Anderson next.
I think Councillor was before me, but I'm going to be very quick, because my questions were largely answered in the conversation about the 2 nurseries. That was what my questions were on. So I think I'll just ask really quickly, and just sort of headlines, or yes or no. I think he's said it a couple of times, but in terms of placements, in the event down the line that these 2 nurseries have to close, there won't be a lack of placements in the borough. It's a statutory duty on the council to ensure that placements are here in Thurrock.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there, Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Snell.
Yeah, I want to take a slightly different approach. Is that I think there is enough information in this report to tell us where we're going. I mean, the fact of the matter is, none of us like the fact that we need to make cuts. None of us like the fact that there are going to be people that won't have a job because of this. But the fact remains that we do have a budget deficit that needs to be covered. And from what I'm hearing, is that what we're getting is the council maintaining all of its statutory duties. I'm seeing that there's no staff that's going to be left in any sort of danger, or I'm not sure the technical term that you've used, but we're looking after the staff that are still retained, and we're fulfilling our technical our statutory duties. We would love to do more, but we're not in that position anymore. Now, we can keep kicking the can down the road as much as we like, but sometimes committees have to make decisions, even when it's not a nice one to make. And I think that we've got enough information here. It is a consultation document by and large, and I think that there may well be some more detail coming further down the line. But what's in the report, I don't think anybody's massively comfortable with it, but we are where we are, and this is what we need to recommend to Cabinet.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Akinbowen and then Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just want to know, I know you are not going to find it difficult for investors to take over, or some people that will have interest in the nursery. But what I just want to know is that if they're unable to take 33 staff, then what happened to those staff? For example, now, if they say, okay, we are interested, but we are unable to take 33 staff, maybe we only need 20. So what happened to the 13?
I think there is a formal process around this, and that includes the staff that are employed in the nursery. I'm looking to Michelle, she's been doing a lot of work on this, but I think
so there is, there's TUPE applies to staff that, if another organisation, and as Sheila said, we remain hopeful. If another organisation comes along, then TUPE applies. So we need to negotiate with the new provider around TUPE. Now, clearly, if at that point that provider, and again, we don't know yet, do we? If at that point that provider said, well, actually, we think we can run this with this amount of staff, then we need to go into consultation with those staff and look at how we can manage that going forward. So there's quite a legal and HR process around protection of staff if another provider comes along. So, we're just, we're just working on that. Once, as Sheila said, we're out to consultation. We're hopeful that there may be some interest. It's interesting that you say you think there might be, which is great. So, as I said, once we get to that stage, we then go into quite detailed negotiations, because there's a number of things we need to consider around the sort of tubing of staff across.
In terms of the children, Chair. In terms of the children, those that are already getting help, will the council continue the help under the new management?
Clearly, if a new provider comes in, I'm so sorry, losing my voice. If a new provider comes in, then they will run the business, and the business includes those children. So yeah, we would do that as part of due diligence. So I'm so sorry, due diligence works on both sides. So the new provider would do their due diligence, we would do ours. But clearly, our priority will be those children that are in the nursery houses.
Finally, Councillor Tandy.
Just a quick question. Are there, because it's council run, is there reduced cost to the parents with the fees?
Yeah, good question. So in the main, the children that access the two council run nurseries are called funded children. So they're funded via our designated schools grant, our early years sort of provider, and our early years funded. And I think that's part of the challenge actually, because I think, in a sense, all of those children there will be funded by the early years opportunities, because those parents wouldn't be in a position to pay. So yeah, they're funded basis.
So would that change if it goes private?
Absolutely not. No.
Oh, okay.
Because the funding follows the child.
Right.
So as I said, absolutely not. The funding absolutely follows the child. So it will follow the child. So and if that child wasn't at that nursery and it went to a nursery 5 minutes up the road, the funding would go with the child because it follows the child.
Right, okay, great. And also listen to your reports. I think you've done a great job condensing everything, moving everything over there to there. And obviously the biggest issue is the budget. I think you've done a great job in your report.
Thank you. Thank you. I do agree with Councillor Snell on one point that we've had too long kicking this can down the road, and that's why we're in this position. So, however, I'm going to move a new recommendation that the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommend that Cabinet does not move forward with these savings, which potentially risk the Council's ability to fulfil its statutory duties.
I should have to call for a vote on that one again, please, Chair.
Yep, if we can have a recorded vote, can you
let me just write the what you've just said then. Recommend Cabinet doesn't move forward with savings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which potentially risks the Council's ability to fulfil its statutory duties. I'm referring here to the risks section 3.1.7. The Council has a range of statutory duties and the necessity to seek alternative funding opportunities throughout the coming year. Okay, can you advise who will be voting on this recommendation? Is it all members of the committee or only elected members?
Elected members.
Okay. I'm voting for and against the cuts.
I'm voting for against cuts.
And
I'm
against?
voting against. And
Following the lead, Graham.
Got the recorded down. So because obviously there's 2 for and 4 against, it wouldn't come through as a recommendation, but it's in the minutes, and these comments will go to Cabinet as the report's going to Cabinet.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm comfortable. Obviously.
Can you be very, very quick because we're already running over time and we've got quite a few agenda items to get through. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on actually, and Councillor Watson can rejoin us later. So item 9, proposed budget reductions for children's social care and early help on pages 47 to 54. Can I ask Janet Simon to introduce the report, please?
Yes. So what I won't do is I won't go through the whole report in detail because I'm assuming that all members have read it. Obviously, this report sets out the proposed changes to the structure in children's services and early help, and looks at the budget efficiencies and how children's social care will deliver budget reductions of 1.2 million and transform service delivery. So the changes are in line with the requirement to focus on prioritising statutory duties and making sure that we're protecting preventative actions to minimise pressure. And it includes a revised operating model which will provide a greater integration of service. So obviously we want to continue to provide a good service to children. We want to make sure that children's needs are being met, and we need to kind of make sure that we continue to be a good authority. So in the report, I've talked about sort of the previous Ofsted inspections, you know, what made us require improvement in 2016, what led to us getting a good outcome in 2019, and the focus visit that we had in 2021, and how we kind of want to maintain that. So I've looked at the services we have currently in terms of putting together a proposal. I've looked at the delivery models that we're currently delivering, and I'm suggesting that we make savings in a variety of ways. What we've looked at is our staffing wherever possible, We want to make sure that staff are not placed at risk. And so we would try and make sure that staff are able to kind of either move into posts that are already available because they're vacant, as Michelle said. So the proposals include deletion of posts and realignment of services, looking at digital efficiencies within our business admin service, increasing our internal fostering households, and reviewing and our delivery model around some of the services that we produce. So currently we provide services internally and externally in the assessment and support of parents and vulnerable children, supervised contact, edge of care services, family group conferences. So we do these in a range of ways, through commission services, our Families Together team, a family group conferencing team, and our contact service, which is currently delivered out of Oak Tree. So the proposal is to bring some of these services together and to deliver them as a whole, so that we have what we call a think family approach, which is a more relationship-based approach, which will be more integrated and hopefully drive some efficiencies, and while we continue to deliver and provide services as we're doing at the moment. So as I said earlier, we want to protect the permanent workforce. So where there's a vacancy that we think is appropriate to freeze, we've had a recruitment freeze, and where possible and safe to do so, we'll look at deleting vacant posts. We know that some vacancies are essential to the service, and we have a statutory duty to a statutory function as children's social care. The proposals that are in this report do not place our statutory duties at risk. I won't go through the whole report because I'm aware of the time and I can see what time it is already. So if people want to ask questions or want to take me back to any part of the report, then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Janet. Any members got any questions? Councillor Snell.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Thank you for your report. I'm just looking at page 50 when we're talking about increasing internal fostering households by 15 each year to generate 0.3 million per annum. Now, that's traditionally been very difficult in Thurrock to increase that. That figure does look a little bit optimistic. Is there some reason that you're going to be you're optimistic to hit that total? It does seem rather high, bearing in mind we struggled historically on this.
Okay. I mean, the last year has been quite difficult. Obviously, during COVID, that's had an impact in terms of our ability to recruit. But we are having quite a high focus on recruitment of foster carers. We've introduced, obviously, the council tax rebate for our foster carers. We're looking at what we can do differently, really. And we do, it's not that we don't actively recruit foster carers, we do. So what we're trying to do is see, well, what else can we do? What difference can we make? So we're doing quite a lot of research at the moment, and we're doing a lot of targeted work. It is an ambitious number. There is no guarantee we'll get there, but we have recruited that level in the past, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it going forward. So that is a big priority for us, and a lot of push is going on that, and our recruitment team are working hard on making sure that we can deliver on that.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question from that? So we're halfway through the year with this ambition to recruit a net of 15. So where are we on it now?
I think I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I can find that out for you. That's not a problem.
Okay. Are we at halfway, do you think?
We're at halfway, but obviously it's about net figures as well. So each year we have our fostering household, so we will have foster carers leaving as well as joining. But I think we are at halfway at this point. But these are proposals for in the next financial year and the following financial year after that. So what we're doing is putting in as much as we can to make sure that we're able to deliver on that in the next year and the year after that and going forward.
I mean, I think it's a good ambition, but I do tend to agree with Councillor Sale that's quite ambitious, and certainly the risk, it's highlighted in the risk section, that whether we're going to actually reach that or not is possibly unlikely. But yeah, it'd be good to get an update of where we actually are with it.
Yes.
This far, the net figure this far through the year. Any other questions? Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for your report. I really appreciate you coming. I just wanted to ask you a quick question. In 3.2, the current structure is all statutory duties. Yeah, that is under review, and that was put in place from a required improvement Ofsted report. And because you put that in place, you've got a good Ofsted report. Why are we changing it? If this is changed, if this is in the place where we've got it in a good place, why are we now decided to coming away from this 4 strategic areas?
So in terms of the 4 strategic areas that are in that report, there is no plans to remove those 4 strategic areas. They will stay in place. That is not the proposal. The proposal is to bring some of the services that we currently run together so that we can have a more holistic approach to how we deliver. So when we look at commission services, when we look at experts that come in externally, it's about bringing some of that stuff together in-house and making sure that we can deliver in a kind of a more streamlined way. It's not to remove that structure that was put in place and which helped us to get to good.
Okay, so the structure's going to stay, but you're going to looking at the commissioning then.
So currently so if you look at, sorry, I'm having to move from screens because I'm looking Teams. So in terms, if you look down at 3.10, so there, what it explains there is that we currently provide internally and externally around assessing, supporting families, parents, vulnerable children, supervised contact. So these things are all done in different places. So some of them are internal, some of them are external, but they're all done separately. So what we're proposing to do is to bring some of that together so that we can deliver it in a more joined up way. So it's not about reducing the services that we provide, but actually doing it in a more thought out, doing it in a way that really joins it up and makes sure that children and families are getting a complete service from us. Sorry.
Okay, so what is your what do you mean by relationship-based approach with young people training to live with their family? So how would you?
So a relationship-based approach is that, you know, what you end up with is a team that is around the child. So rather than having somebody in the contact centre that supervises contact, somebody over there who's providing some family support, somebody else doing an assessment, and somebody else, I don't know, doing a family group conference, sitting in different places, you would have a team that works closely together with the family, building relationships with them that can work with them from the beginning right through to the end of their involvement with social care, so that those conversations are being had, and families don't have to keep repeating their story. So what sometimes happens when you have the services apart is that families have to go to one person, tell them something, then they go to the other person and tell them something. But this will mean that families will be able to have those conversations in a way that means they don't have to keep repeating that story, and it will also deliver efficiencies.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I still don't understand what that means. So we're keeping the structure, but we're moving to a new operating model. What's the difference between the structure and the operating model? I mean, I've got the same comments on this report, not quite so much, because we have actually got some figures in this report. And we've got obviously the total of 22 posts that are at risk, with a maximum of 13 redundancies.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for including those details, which are important to know. But I still don't understand. I mean, we've got a service here that we're moving to an operating system that's collaborative, holistic, cheaper. Why didn't we do this 2 years ago?
Well, it's not that this isn't something that hasn't been thought about, but I think when 2 years ago we were on our journey to from requires improvement to good, there were lots of priorities, and the main thing at that point was making sure children were safeguarded, that the areas that had been identified in the 2016 Ofsted inspection, that they were addressed. So things like spans of control for managers, making sure that caseloads for social workers were appropriate and in the right place. So that's where the focus was then. Now that we have got to that position, so there's no plan within this proposal to either increase caseloads or increase spans of control to a level that is unacceptable. So now that we've got that in place, the next thing is to look at, well, how can we improve and enhance what we deliver? And we do have to make efficiencies, as has been discussed in this. And these are proposals. We are in consultation. Staff have got an opportunity to make their comments about the proposals, and it may change. So it's not that we haven't thought about this previously. But not that we've had plans. I'm not saying we've had plans for 2 years to do this, but it is something we're thinking about. We're looking at all the research that's out there, sort of the social, any reviews that are going on, and actually what we can see is that when families feel like they're part of something, then they're more likely to engage. So we want to move from where we were to where we are, so kind of we've got to good. That doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to try and improve. Okay. So if we can do that while making efficiencies, then that's a win.
So you're saying that this isn't going to expand social workers' caseloads and spans of control to unacceptable levels. What do you mean by unacceptable levels? So there may be rises in caseloads and there may be extensions. Okay, so could you clarify?
So we won't be. There's no plan to increase caseloads. That's not a plan at all. And based on these proposals, that won't impact on caseloads. In terms of spans of control, our team managers on average have it was decided, I don't know, in the last year, 2 years before Ofsted came, and we got a good rating, that managers were able to manage a span of control of up to 6. So we've realigned where some of the team managers had under that level. We've realigned where we've had vacancies to make sure that none of those managers have more than 6, but where they maybe had 5, there will be some managers that might have 6. And some managers already had 6, so they will get no more than 6. So 6 is what we've determined is the manageable level, and these proposals will not push them over that level.
Okay.
Could I just add to that?
Yeah.
So, and I think it is about the journey we've been on in children's social care, and we know in order to continue to get good practice, there's no national benchmarking about what's the right number of cases or what's the right number of diagnoses. What we know is authorities that tend to get good or more, their managers don't have more than 6 reports. You can have less, that's great, but you don't have more than 6. And so we made sure our benchmark is that we never have more than 6 for a span of control. So these proposals will not increase our managers' spans of control beyond 6. And the caseloads that we've set, they're slightly different across the teams because teams do slightly different things. But we think that we have caseloads at a good level to enable our social workers to do good quality work with the children that they're working with. And in the Ofsted inspection in 2019-2021, they're saying that they think those caseloads are manageable. These proposals will not impact on social workers' caseloads and or manager spans of control so that it goes over the number that we consider to be the right number for our managers and our workers to do good social work.
So what will they impact on? Because clearly there are going to be some posts lost.
So I don't know if Janet wants to continue or she wants me to take over.
No, I'm happy to continue. So what it will impact on is that there will be some reduction in our business support. That's laid out in the report that you've got in front of you. There will be some impact in terms of family support. So we currently have family support workers that sit within the teams. What we're looking at doing is pull those into the one service. So there'll be a slight reduction on our family support workers. And there'll be a reduction. Sorry.
Janet? How many, Janet?
How many? I think it's 5.
And how many in business support?
It's in the report. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I'll have to get back into the report.
Sorry.
Sorry, I haven't got the exact numbers, but I think it was a total of 12. So in business support, what we have done is we have held vacancies in business support whilst we've been looking at this. So to make sure that if these proposals went forward, we would have enough vacancies for those business support. So there should be, I think it's maybe 1 or 2 business support. So the majority of the business support roles will actually be managed through vacancies, and obviously other vacancies within the authority. So we're hoping that none of our business support will be at risk ultimately or be made redundant.
So that's 7. Where are the other 15 at risk?
So
6 or 7.
So a total of 22 posts. So that's including the business support. So they're at risk whilst we are in this process. Obviously, there are conversations with them and we are in consultation. So we're looking at a maximum of 13 redundancies. But that's a combination of some posts that are on these, so things like family group conferencing. We're looking at reducing that. The family support workers, I think 2 life story workers that we have. We have 4 members of staff who do life story work, and so we're looking at reducing from 4 to 2. So it's those sorts of vacancies. So I can't. Sorry.
Sheila just wants to come in, Janet.
Yeah. So on the posts that are at risk, and as I say, there are processes going on right now, because of posts that we've held vacant across children's services, that includes Michelle's area as well as Janet's. What we are looking at is posts that are of an equivalent grade that can, once these processes have been gone through, be offered to staff who then are at risk of redundancy. So again, we are hopeful that the redundancies won't necessarily come to pass, that people will be able to be redeployed into similar posts that are required in the structures. So it's not posts that are at risk.
I accept that and understand that, but I'm just trying to get into the mathematics of this, because at the moment we're saying that there's 22 posts at risk, or 22.5 posts at risk. There's 1 or 2 in business services, 5 maybe in family support, 2
I suppose what I because we are in consultation.
Where are the others coming from? If they're not coming from social workers, they're not coming from managers.
Okay, so there are some management posts, which is why I said in terms of spans of control, there's some changes there. What I don't want to do is get into the detail of who those individuals are, because we are in consultation. It is 22 posts across the service, which is a combination of qualified, unqualified, and business support. But none of those roles will impact on statutory services that we provide, will impact on spans of control, or will impact on caseloads.
Okay, yeah, so where are they coming from then? Is the rest coming from management posts? I don't need you to give me the individual posts, but just...
But that's what I've just said. Some of them are from managers' posts, some will be qualified, some will be unqualified, and some are business support. So in terms of breaking it down, if I break it down into lots of detail, then it's, we are in consultation. Nothing is set in stone at the present. And we want to get through that consultation period, allow people to make their representations, and then we will be obviously looking at what comes through, and then a decision will be made. And as Sheila has said previously, it will then go to council in December. But right now, it is a combination of posts across children's social care. So what we haven't done, we haven't taken anything from our early help, because we know how important it is to kind of enable children to stay at home in their families, to be supported. We've not taken anything from statutory services. We're not proposing to take statutory social work away, and we're not proposing to increase caseloads or spans of control.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yes, obviously we should be, this process should have happened much earlier. But unfortunately, there seems to have been a weak administration who've been prepared to not to make the hard choices to keep services sustainable.
Yeah, that's yet another political statement. It's not supposed to be a political committee, and you are constantly making political statements.
Well, let me make a statement about scrutiny. I mean, I'm trying to scrutinise these changes to ascertain what impact this is going to have on our statutory duties.
Other councillors present, it seems to be the chairperson's show rather than anybody else getting a chance.
I hadn't seen anybody else wanted to.
Because no one can get a word in edgeways if you know, excuse me being a bit impertinent. So, I mean, can we kindly try and not be quite so political, and can other people get an opportunity, please?
Did you have a question? You've already asked a question, haven't you? Or did you have another question?
I asked a question, but I noticed other people might be wishing to ask a question.
Well, nobody's indicated that I've seen. I do apologise if I haven't seen people indicate.
Probably zoned out, I would imagine, by now.
Well, I mean, I think you need to stop being so rude, really, councillors. Now, I'm trying to get to the bottom of where these things are going to happen. If this process had been further along, then you could have brought a report that we could actually scrutinise at scrutiny. So I have the same problem with this report, I'm afraid, that I did with the last one, that there's not enough detail for me to be able to adequately, I don't know what the feelings of the rest of the committee are, scrutinise what impact these cuts will have on services. Would anybody else like to ask a question or clarify anything in the report?
Can I just ask a quick question, please? Janet, on one of your proposals, you've got the review of the delivery model for the out of service for the social working duty. Where are you in that review, and how much in the savings do you think will come out of that review?
So right now we're just looking at that, having a conversation about it, just really looking at whether there are different delivery models for delivering an out of hours service. So we haven't got anywhere with it. We haven't got any firm proposals. I'm not absolutely sure about what those savings are, but we think that's an area we could deliver savings.
Okay, can I ask another question that's not in the report? It's about your social workers. In terms of the social workers, do you have a high percentage of agency social workers sitting within your service? And is there a recruitment campaign on social workers, if you have?
Sorry, you broke up for a minute there. You were asking how many?
I think Sheila's.
Yeah, sorry. I think the question was about, do we have a high level of agency staff? And I'm saying no, we don't have a high level of agency staff. We have got agency staff, but I think it was around about 15-16%, which is quite low for children's social care. And when we recruit, we have been successful in our recruitment. It's a really hard market to recruit in, children's social workers nationally. But yeah, I think we've got predominantly permanent managers, haven't we, Janet?
Yes, we have.
You know, across our whole service, certainly up service managers and higher up as well for social workers. So yeah, we have been successful in recruiting.
So I think my issue is you've got these vacancies that you have took the spending and spent in another service, in another part of your service, because vacancies don't hold a budget, do they? You take the budget away and you use them somewhere else if you're holding vacancies. So my bit for you, I want to know is if you're going to slash those vacancies, that funding is still sitting in a service somewhere that you're going to have to take away to that service?
Not quite.
Right, so if I've got,
Sorry.
if I've got 20 quid here, and then it's still sitting there as a vacancy, but I transfer it to you,
Yeah.
and then I get rid of that, you still want my £20,
Yeah.
but you're using it for something else, but then I've got to cut you by £20, and that's what you're doing.
So
How are you going to do that? Because to me, it's a bit of double counting going on. I don't quite understand how you're going to cut a vacancy that's not funded, because you've already took that funding away.
No, the funding's still there. So what we've done in previous years, I think if you're talking about having vacancies in previous years and then
you took it away, like you said earlier.
No, you don't take it away. You might offset that money in that financial year against another budget that was overspending, for example. But when you start a new financial year, that money is still there in your budget for that post.
Yeah, but you took that money again at the beginning of that post, haven't you, and put it somewhere else in your service.
I'm not sure that we have.
So you've left vacant posts with budgets assigned to them.
The money's still there.
That's why you're going to cut the vacancies out to get the savings.
Yes, yes.
As well as 13 redundancies possible.
But in children's social care and early help, there has been less vacancies. So when you had Michelle's post in Michelle's side of it, they had more vacancies for longer. In children's social care, we haven't had those level of vacancies. But this year, as they've been occurring,
we've been
keeping them, freezing them.
And you've just been holding it. So if you're holding those vacancies, all those vacancies, how much do all those vacancies come to? If you're holding the budget for them already?
I don't think that there's that many in children's social care against this budget here.
No, there isn't.
There isn't. So some of these posts, which is why there are staff in children's social care and early help who are going through a process, because we didn't have as many vacancies in that part of the service as we had in Michelle's part of the service, where nobody's been put at risk in that part of the service because of that.
They're just going to be redeployed. They're just going to go into new jobs.
So any of our social care colleagues who have been put at risk and who are not successful in the process, I've held some which is a statutory duty.
So they can be redeployed to you.
So they can be redeployed, yes. That's what we've tried to do, is protect the workforce in the best way that we can. So we've held on to some of the vacancies that are our statutory duty, and they will be available to staff who perhaps aren't successful in the recruitment process.
Yeah.
So
can I just say, so some of those vacancies being held in Michelle's side of Charles, say in SEND, which is statutory posts, those posts are being covered either by agency people, or by people who are on short-term contracts, who come for the posts for 6 months or a year, so that we know that if we have permanent staff who are at risk, and these, having gone through a whole process, these are the right posts, those posts are available for those staff. But we haven't just left those posts sitting vacant with no one at all in them, because they are roles that we need to be delivered.
So no, that's what I'm getting to. So they're not just sitting there on the establishment with nothing in it. You have got agency,
or
cover going in those posts. So they're like not really vacant. They've just got people sitting in there.
And what it means though is, if there are permanent staff who are at risk or who need to be redeployed, we have posts that we can use for that purpose.
So just, sorry,
was that what you were?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was trying to get. So at the 22 posts, 13 you're looking at possible redundancy, but the 9 posts that are left, are you going to put through to redeployment over into Michelle's area then? Or give that opportunity?
Opportunities, definitely.
So the 13 redundancies, is that voluntary redundancy, or is that actually what you are going to be making people redundant?
So in terms of the process that we're going through, staff will have some options in that.
So they can go voluntary?
They will have some options in that. But if we have equivalent posts, and we want to keep people in the organisation to do these roles, because the the roles where we have got cover in them but not permanent cover are statutory roles that we do need to fill. So we would want to have staff filling those posts, permanent staff.
Got it. And redundancies will be paid from your budget?
We pay through the council, yeah.
General fund. Any other questions?
There's not much.
Councillor Slough.
Yeah, sometimes it sounds like we're on the employment tribunal rather than a children's committee here. Just want to make it very clear though, so with the changes that are proposed, there will be no risk to your statutory services. There will be no risk at all to the children that are under those services, and there will be no risk to the staff that remain to deliver those services. So despite what's been said previously, the service itself, which is what we're here to discuss, you're confident can be performed and maintained to a good level as we have recently been Ofsted to.
Yes. I don't know if Janet got all that.
No,
sorry.
I don't think she did. Yeah, she might have frozen actually. But when it boils down to it, that is the answer I was looking for.
She's
So,
right.
so thank you.
Janet, did you hear that?
Sorry, did I missed that? I think.
I can ask you it again. All it was, Janet, was that despite what we've heard earlier, are you confident that with the remodelled service that there will be no risk to the services because of the remodelling, that there will be no risk to the children that use the services as a result of the remodelling, and that the staff that work within that service are at no risk, and that the service can be maintained to at least as good a level as to which we were recently rated by Ofsted?
Yes. I
Thank
can
you.
confirm that.
Any further questions? Okay, let's move to the recommendations. I again find myself needing to move a second recommendation. The committee recommends that Cabinet do not move forward with these savings, which potentially risk the ability of children's services to adequately safeguard children and young people in Thurrock.
Also, I will call for a vote on that one, please, Chair.
Let's move to the vote. All those for? And against? Have you got that, Grace? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 11. Sorry, item 10, the Ofsted focused visit on children at risk from extra familial harm, on pages 55 to 66. Can I ask Janet Simon to introduce this, please?
Okay, so this is a report regarding the recent Ofsted focus visit, which took place in June, July, sort of crossed over between the last day of June, first day of July. We had Ofsted, obviously as part of their ILAC framework, which replaced the previous single inspection framework, came in, and we obviously in 2019 we got a good judgment in terms of all areas across children's services, and this report is an update to the committee on the recent focus visit. So obviously the inspection is very detailed and robust and reviews the service. The focus visit was announced on the 16th of June, 2 weeks before the visit began. During those 2 weeks, Ofsted were provided with a number of documents, over 100. And when Ofsted came, they met with the portfolio holder for children, met with the chief executive, partners, children, and family was aware there was who were affected by extra familial harm. They looked at the experience of children. They spoke to social workers. It was an off-site visit, so it was mainly done remotely. It's not a judgment inspection, and at the end of that there was a letter published, which is attached to this report, One of the things it stated was that Thurrock Council continues to provide effective, responsive services to vulnerable children. Children have remained a key focus to elected members, and they continue to be a corporate priority. The focus visit reflects the hard work and the commitment of all those striving to ensure children and their families receive a good service within the council and from partners. And Ofsted commented that the local authority have strengthened our oversight of services in response to feedback given at the last inspection. Obviously, as with any inspection of services, they noted some areas for continued improvement. There were 3 recommendations for improvement, and the partnership will be incorporating those recommendations into action plans, really, so that we can take those forward and make sure that children in Thurrock are receiving a good service and continue to receive a good service as identified in the report. Obviously, the focus visit is part of a whole system and Ofsted's approach to inspections. So the 3 areas that the report identified was earlier transition planning for children in care and care leavers who are exposed to exploitation gangs and extrafamilial harm. Making sure in terms of the children who are missing, take up of return home interviews and the information that we use to rely on to capture activity and the impact of these interviews, and that the arrangements for support and engagement with children at risk of extrafamilial harm, making sure that we're very agile and we're able to kind of try and be kind of do things differently in some ways, really. So sort of trying to, I suppose, being kind of more agile and thinking how we do that. So we're taking those forward. We will make sure that we're building on those. We've already started on that already, and we report to a monthly development board around some of the things that we're doing. The report's attached. I won't read it out for you all because I'm sure you've all read it. Overall, it's a positive report with some recommendations which you'd expect every local authority gets something.
Thank you, Jan, for your report. Any questions from members? Anybody? Well, at the risk of being accused of dominating proceedings, I just make sure nobody wants to ask a question. In terms of earlier transition planning for looked after children and care leavers who are exposed, first of all, you know, I mean, it's good that the headline is that we still remain a good service. So well done to everybody who's made those improvements. In terms of earlier transition planning for looked after children and care leavers, I know it says some care leavers have to move home several times within a short period of time. What is being done to address this?
Okay, so we have a transitions panel. We're doing some work with our adult colleagues, with our housing colleagues. We have a regular transitions panel that looks at all of those issues for our young people. So trying to make sure that we're not waiting until young people reach 18 before we start thinking about their needs as young adults, but trying to do that much earlier. So those conversations are happening. We're reviewing those things regularly. We've got a joint housing protocol for our care leavers with our housing colleagues, and we've got a ready for transition preparedness panel as well, where we work with our young people to make sure they're able to manage a tenancy. If they can't manage a tenancy, what's the best kind of property for them? Is that sharing with other young people of their own age? Do they need supported accommodation? And what can we do to get them to the point where they're able to meet their needs in the community and kind of as young adults and maintain a tenancy? And so they don't have to kind of, you know, so we also encourage some of our young people to stay put. So if they're in a fostering placement, we encourage them to stay put in that fostering placement where they can continue to kind of develop as you would for any child who's living at home. So that also happens. So it's just trying to find different ways and making sure it's not one size fits all. So it isn't the minute a young person hits 18, they're suddenly ready to live on their own, but just making sure we've got proper assessments in place. So each young person who's a care leaver or who's 16 plus we'll have what we call a pathway plan, and it looks at all of those things and looks at the plans for making sure that they're ready. So that's what we're trying to do. We're also looking at our sufficiency to make sure we've got the right kind of accommodation for our young people, and for those young people who do move into a tenancy, what can we do to support them in that tenancy to make sure that they're able to absolutely sustain it and for it to be a positive experience, that they don't end up having to either be evicted because they've not been able to pay their rent, or they haven't been able to manage a tenancy, or there's an issue around, I don't know, social nuisance or something like that. So making sure we're having those conversations and supporting young people.
So just to clarify, these are all new things arising from the focus visit? Or
No, some of those things we were already working on. So we're aware with some of the issues that
Ofsted. What are we doing new since the focus visit, or what are we planning to do new since the focus visit?
So we are actually developing some stuff, some new initiatives with our adult colleagues. I think that's probably the newest thing that we're doing. But some of these things we just developed just before Ofsted arrived. So we were in the process of actually delivering some of the things that Ofsted identified, but they weren't embedded. But we are embedding them now.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the return home interviews, obviously you're managing to get just over half, 58% of those happening. What ideas have you got for how to engage young people so that a higher proportion of them taking part in those return home interviews?
So we're looking at who is the best person to speak to young people when they return home after they're missing. So we deliver our return home interviews through Inspire. So we're having weekly meetings. So since the Ofsted focus visit, we've started having a weekly surgery where we're looking at young people who are missing. We're looking at who the best person is to speak to them. Sometimes social workers do those return home interviews, and they weren't captured within the figures that were Ofsted saw. So we're making sure that if the social worker does that return home interview, that's now recorded, and we're kind of absolutely having those conversations and trying to see what the blockages might be. So what is it that's preventing, so if a young person, for example, is not wanting to speak, so we offer a return home interview to 100% offer of return home interview, but sometimes young people will refuse it. If a young person regularly goes missing, and going missing can mean anything from an hour to a day, it can be, sometimes it is literally that young person's late home. And so if we don't know where they are, then they're reported missing. So a young person might have been late home 3 nights that week. That's 3 episodes, but we might get to speak to them once. So I think it's about being really clear how many young people weren't seen, how many young people were missing 3 times that week, and we saw them once. So we've got a bit more of a picture, and we're able to tell more of a story about and reassure ourselves and that young people are safe and that we know what their story is, and actually learning lessons from that. So if young people are saying, for example, I don't know, I wasn't missing, I was at my mother's or I was at my cousin's, then trying to have those conversations with those adults so that we're really clear, so that young people know they can tell us where they are, so that we're not reporting them missing, and we're just clear that they're at friends or they're at family members. So we're just trying to do things differently and enabling young people to have those conversations with us.
Has there been any looking at what authorities that are doing well on their return home interviews are doing differently, and what we can learn from other authorities' experiences?
I think, the level of return home interviews that we're reporting isn't really, there's no data to be able to compare against. It's not something that we can say, right, we know that this authority is doing this or that authority is doing the other. That data isn't out there and available and reportable at the moment. But when we've had conversations with our colleagues in the Eastern region, they're not saying, they're saying, well, actually, that's about the level we're at as well. So we're showing as comparable, if not better than some authorities.
Okay.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah,
One of the things the inspectors said when they were feeding back to us was, their concern was the harder to reach young people, if you like, the ones that say, actually, I don't want, you're offered a return home interview, but they say, no, thanks, I don't want it. Their challenge to us was, what are you doing to engage those young people? So it's, I think they recognise that 58% take up of them is not necessarily bad, but actually what they were saying was, because we are a good authority and aspiring to be more, in order to do that, what you have to do is concentrate on those young people that say no, and work even harder to find out, they don't want just the straightforward interview or discussion. What else should you be doing? What else could you do? And that's when they were saying to us, we can see that some of your social workers are doing the return, so why don't you incorporate that into the work you're doing, as a for example. There's no national benchmarking on this because it's not collected as an annual return, so we couldn't go to others and go, oh, look, actually we rate here. But what we did do was, in the Eastern region, did a bit of a ring round and said, well, what does it look like for you? And we weren't that much of an outlier, but what we were saying was, what do other places do to reach those young people that actually just say, no, I don't want to speak to someone? And it's actually Michelle's service that runs the return home interviews. It's separate from social care. And so that's the piece of work we're doing, is looking outside to say, well, what do others do then that we can learn from?
great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Let's move to the recommendations then, on page 68.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed. Bit of a single-handed scrutiny of that. Item 12, work programme, on pages 109 to... Oh, I beg your pardon.
I'm conscious.
Given the time, I'm wondering if we're going to have the time to actually...
we might want to move that to the next meeting, Chair.
Let's move it to the next meeting. Are we all in agreement of moving that item to the next meeting?
Yeah, agreed.
I'm happy to do that. I'm conscious that it will also come back in December, because this comes and the next meeting, it comes every time. So the next meeting isn't, we put in an additional meeting. So
Yeah, in
can I just
November.
be clear? Because to get it in November and in December, I'm not going to have much more to tell you, So I'm happy to go with whatever you want, but I think it's either got to be November, and I'll update the action plan again, so it's more up to date, or we go back to the December when it would normally come back. Sorry.
If I may, Chair, normally when you defer an item from this agenda, we'll go to the next scheduled meeting. So the extraordinary is an extra scheduled meeting in the municipal calendar. So this would go to December. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's absolutely
It'll
fine.
go to December
And
then.
what I'll do is I'll update it as the report for December. Thank you. If there is anything people want to know, just drop me an email. Thank you.
So, item 12, work programme, on pages 109 to 112. Can I ask Grace to go through the work programme, please?
There's not been any new updates since the publication of the agenda, but I'll note that Chair, you did request about the SEND routes for more of a fuller report to go on to the work programme. Did you want that as an item on the agenda, or to go as a briefing note?
Sorry, I don't...
What we mentioned earlier, the SEND safe routes from the...
Oh, you said about the
that's transport.
Home to school transport. Didn't it say in that you were going to bring a report at a later date about...
It didn't say in that report. There was a lot of discussion around home to school transport.
Maybe we talked about it in the meeting that we had, but my understanding was that there was going to be a separate report brought about home to school transport.
Not that I can recall. So not that I can recall. There was discussion around it tonight, but not that I can recall. I mean, the challenge around bringing a report is that if it's a report around, as I said, there's two parts to this, isn't there? There's the safe route parts, and I totally take the councillor's view that clearly on some of those routes we've got some of our vulnerable children, absolutely. So there's that part, which, as I explained tonight, is quite a complex thing. There's really, you have to do a whole risk assessment. That has to go through a legal process. So, and we're in that process now. So I'm not sure what I could bring. But and then there's the post-16 SCND decision that was made last year, and we're now just implementing it. And as I've tried to give reassurance to committee, any vulnerable young person that would struggle with that, clearly we'll make sure that they get to their post-16 provision. So I'm struggling, colleagues, to know what you'd want me to bring back to committee.
Okay. Sorry if I've misunderstood that. I thought that was coming as a separate agenda item at a later date. So it was the report on the nurseries then that's coming as a...
That's coming as a briefing note, yeah, around what we've had back through the consultation. So that will come as a briefing note, yeah, which is, you know, what we said we would do, a briefing note, just to give an overview to committee around what the consultation was telling us.
Okay, thank you. Is that clear, Grace?
Yes.
Yeah. So nothing else. Do members have anything else they'd like to add to the work programme?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair, would you mind, sorry, I know I've asked about this, but I just want to be clear because it's for November. It's about the school grades data. I think, as I've probably said to committee before, there's no national published data. So for the last 2 years, there isn't any published national data. Nationally, you'll have heard, you know, A-level results up, GCSE results up, but they're not published. They're not published data. So again, I wouldn't want committee to be disappointed if I bring something that just doesn't give you the data that historically. So previously, 2 years ago, I'd have bought a report. It'd have looked at all the key stage 2, key stage 3, key stage 4.
Michelle, given the time, can we take this conversation offline and
yeah.
we'll
I'm
decide
happy to
from
do
there?
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I now declare the meeting closed at 9:27.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Janet.
Bye, Janet.
Bye, Jenny.